Coming up, vindicated, relocated, irritated. A lively look at the week's top local stories on both sides of state lines straight ahead.
Welcome everyone, I'm Nick Haynes and delighted to be with you again on the program that helps you connect the dots on the big stories making our news in this place we call home. Pouring through those news stories with us this week, star political columnist and the host of Up to Date on KCUR-FM, Steve Kraske. From behind the microphone at 98.1 FM KMBZ, Scott Parks. From the pitch, Steve Vockrodt. And star reporter, columnist and blogger Dave Helling. A judge this week dismisses transit activist Clay Chastain's lawsuit against Mayor Sly James. Chastain, who recently came in third in a three-way primary race for mayor, claimed James's late payment of his taxes disqualified him from holding public office in Kansas City. Tax records from Jackson County show James was late on his taxes for 3 consecutive years after he became mayor. He has since made good on those tax payments. But what reason did the judge offer for keeping James on the ballot, Steve?
Well, he said that Clay Chastain didn't have standing to bring this case, that this case didn't have merit in court. And it seems to me, Nick, at some point here we have to make a decision about how much more we're going to be covering Clay Chastain and all his antics around town. He has shot and missed any number of times, and here's just one more example.
But this also must have still a bearing, though, on Sly James as the mayor, that this issue has even come up, though, Scott.
Well, and I think that's probably the larger story here. I've given up on Clay Chastain, and I know a lot of people in the media have as well. I won't even say his name on the air anymore because he's such an egomaniac and a narcissist. But I think the larger story here is, and I'm a fan of Sly James, so don't misinterpret this, but how is a man who is a lawyer, a mayor of the largest city in this area, able to go 3 years in a row and forget to pay his taxes? You would think someone in a high political office like him, if he had, we can forgive the first one, but this has happened 3 years in a row where he's failed to pay his taxes on time. How does a man of his intelligence and profession forget like that? And I simply cannot understand it.
And what are the ramifications then for Sly James of that? Because right now he is only now going to be running in this general election coming up in June against Vincent Lee, who is somebody with very little name recognition, no money, and perceived to have no chance whatsoever against the mayor, Steve Vockrodt.
Right, and that's part of why the ramifications of this are pretty slim. So now that the lawsuit's pretty much dead, although Clay tells me that he plans to appeal, and that his attorney tells me that, or tells him, and he subsequently tells me that the judge got it all wrong. But I don't really see.
Really shocking.
Yeah, so I don't really see the margin in it for Clay. But at the so the ramifications for Sly are really.
Is this the end of the story then, Dave?
Well, Vincent Lee, by the way, told me he also wants to appeal. We'll see. I mean, the judge sort of said, Vincent, you waited too long to become a part of this case. So my guess is the appeals court will throw it out. It'll be a minor issue in the mayoral campaign, but it won't change the outcome in any way. There was a very interesting, significant part of this ruling, though, Nick, that I'd like to point out. At one point, the judge, who in essence said everything you filed was wrong, but by the way, even if it had been right, the facts don't support your allegation. But at one point, she said, look, for Vincent Lee, who wanted to join the lawsuit, the only possible remedy would be to put him on the ballot. He's already on the ballot. What can I do for Vincent Lee that he doesn't already have an entitlement to? Clay Chastain, and this describes his entire career in Kansas City, utterly misunderstands the law. I mean, it's just he just absolutely has no conception of what the law is. This was the latest example of that. It has caused unknown heartache and lots of spending in this community. Let's hope that's come to an end.
But he knows how to make headlines. He knows what the press will go for, what we bite on, year after year, and he still is pulling those strings. I just think it's time for the media at large to really take a really hard look at what stories, what kind of coverage we'll give this guy.
Well, let's look at some big issues. The mayor's office announced this week what they called a major economic development for the east side of Kansas City. What is the announcement? The city is paying $12 million to tear down the rundown Linwood Shopping Center at 31st and Prospect and replacing it with a Sunfresh grocery store. The project is expected to break ground this fall and open next summer.
The risk is only in the minds of people that we're still convincing to come east of Troost.
Right.
That's why I wanted to thank Mr. Lipari, because he recognized that it's really not that risky.
The mayor certainly feels a lot of pressure to see development happen east of Troost when there's so much that has happened elsewhere in the city. But how is putting a grocery store on this block at a cost of $12 million being viewed, Steve?
I think it's largely being viewed pretty favorably. If you look at where the city has subsidized development, you can even pull up a map on the city's website and see where they have incentive areas, and there isn't a whole lot of it east of Troost. And so this is a pretty substantial development. It gives people an opportunity to shop at a full-service grocery store. And this is what incentives and subsidies were meant to do. It was to prompt and support development in places where they otherwise wouldn't happen. This Linwood Shopping District is one of those places.
When the mayor first ran for office, he said grocery stores have no interest in going into the urban core. It's all about money. They don't want to do anything to come into that area. This is not going to happen. What actually changed then to allow this to happen now? Is it that they're dangling all of this money?
Well, we should keep an eye on this project, Nick, in part because they dangled a lot of money years ago when it first opened. There was all kinds of federal community development money involved in subsidizing the store. And eventually it began to serve substandard merchandise, or at least the public felt that way. And margins are very slim in the retail grocery business. It is hard to make grocery stores work. It will be extraordinarily hard to make it work in this neighborhood where incomes are low, and there will be no subsidies for operating the grocery stores. The city's going to buy the property, rent it for free, in essence for free, and then Sunfresh has to make a go of it. It will not be easy, and that's what the mayor was talking about in the little soundbite you talked about there, because despite what he said, there is some risk involved. And there may be a need for the public to step up further down the road.
Steve.
I think there's a reason for some optimism here. The neighborhoods around this store are hungry for this, to borrow a cheap pun. And if you look over just across the way to Kansas City, Kansas, where that government has subsidized some grocery stores and seen great success. One grocery store just off of I-70, just west of downtown 18th Street. Huge success. The developer there wishes they had doubled the size of that grocery store. Mayor Mark Howland talks about that frequently. So there's reasons to think that maybe even this store will work well.
And can I just say briefly, the mayor and others at the announcement this week said that this Sunfresh was modeled on the Wyandotte County Sunfresh, the Kansas City, Kansas. Similar setup where you in essence get the rent free, the community provides the facility, and then you operate.
And another positive of this grocery store, Scott Parks, is it's another place for Clay Chastain to collect signatures.
Yes, and right in the margin, sexy blonde.
Okay, all right. This week, the governors of Kansas and Missouri both see their authority slip. Jay Nixon just vetoed a bill that would have removed thousands of families from welfare programs through tighter rules on how long Missourians could claim benefits. But that veto was overridden this week. Meanwhile, in Kansas, Sam Brownback sees a mutiny by his fellow Republicans as they override his veto of new regulations on ride-booking companies like Uber. The company wasn't happy. They responded, Kansas, just shut down Uber. In Missouri, you've got a Democratic governor presiding over an overwhelmingly Republican legislature, so it shouldn't be surprising to us that Nixon is being overruled. But it's different in Kansas. You'd think Sam Brownback could get anything he wanted in a legislature where Democrats play only a token role and Republicans rule the roost, right?
Yeah, this was surprising a little bit. Clearly a clash of different philosophies here. The governor sort of standing by the tried and true Republican belief that no regulation is sort of the way to go. But Republican lawmakers saying, hey, the regulations we're sticking on Uber here are no different than anywhere else. There's no reason to turn away from what we're asking for here. I think the real interesting thing is going to be, Nick, will Uber remain out of Kansas in the years and months to come, or will they sort of change their minds and come back in?
And does anybody care, Scott? Is this an issue that comes up a lot on your program?
Yes.
Do listeners care about this?
Uber, when it was first starting to gain popularity, scared people like me. and probably people like everyone around this table. But the younger generations, the millennials, have really attached themselves to Uber. Now, I think Uber is posturing here. They could, of course, come back into the Kansas market. It might be a little bit more expensive for them and their drivers, but they could come back. And I applauded Governor Brownback when he vetoed this, because I think, and perception sometimes becomes reality. There's this perception, I think, that Kansas is backwards, and it goes back more than a decade. And I think this only feeds into that perception that this state is backwards in many regards and is not welcoming to younger people, which we desperately need.
Well, courage or audacious cheek? A Topeka waitress serving Kansas Governor Sam Brownback this week lays down his bill and writes her own entry in the tip section of the receipt. Tip the schools. The story went viral. The governor, fresh from his visit to the Boss Hog joint, simply said he's in public out a lot and gets a lot of people saying they agree with him and a lot of people who don't. But the head of the Kansas Republican Party wasn't as kind. Clay Barker telling the Topeka Capital Journal, "So you're publicizing her arrogant stupidity and utter ignorance? Typical liberal Kansas media. Where are the stories of the thousands of people who have been complimenting and have had complimentary things to say about the governor?" So where are the stories of the thousands of people who have said complimentary things about the governor? Dave Helling?
Well, the real question is, where are people saying complimentary things about the governor? Because his continued budget problems have eroded his support in the state of Kansas. I think Clay Barker's complaint was kind of on target. I mean, you know, one note slipped at a barbecue restaurant becomes a huge story. I am working on a weekend story, though. I've talked to Governor Nixon, Sly James, some other people. Politicians get this kind of thing all the time. I mean, you literally on a daily basis, if you're a well-known public figure, people come up to you at the Home Depot or at the restaurant or at the ballpark, and they want to give you a piece of their mind. And so I thought Governor Brownback's reaction in this case was actually great. He sort of said, look, I get people coming up to me. Some people like me, some people don't. I think he understands what Clay Barker doesn't, and that goes with the territory. You're going to take some slings sometimes in the
Did this story deserve to get the attention it got, Scott?
No, I don't think it deserved the attention it got, but I can't say that I didn't fall into the trap as well. We talked about it on the show this week. However, I think the waitress might be getting a little bit too much credit. You know, she took a stand about school funding in the state of Kansas, but remember, before she wrote that on the receipt, she had to go to Facebook to ask her friends, I've got the governor as a customer, what should I complain about?
And she was quitting that day, too.
Yeah,
so.
yes. And one of her friends suggested complain about the school funding mess in the state of Kansas, and we can't deny that there is a mess there. But she had to go ask her friends for advice on what do I complain to the governor about. She wasn't, you know, taking some great stand in Kansas
Well,
politics.
this was a week where 7 school districts in Kansas decided they had to quit school early this particular term because they don't have enough money left. So school funding is an issue. But in the KSNT report that we just showed, when they showed the name bar for the waitress, it had underneath hero waitress.
That might be going a little too far. I don't disagree with Scott, but hey, sometimes the media hops on these sort of fun stories that sort of embody larger concerns, larger issues. This story fit that bill to a T, and the media wrote it for a little bit. It's going to wash away very quickly. This is nothing really out of the ordinary menu of stories the media might hop on, because it was just fun and it's kind of different.
We should not take our eye off the ball. The legislature spent the entire week talking about ways to raise money in Kansas, and there is absolutely no consensus on how to do that. Sales taxes, property taxes, amnesties, they have to come up with $400 million or more in 1 year. There is no appetite for doing it. It could be weeks before the lawmakers actually reach some understanding of what they need to do. And when they do, Governor Sam Brownback will sign one of the largest tax increases in Kansas history.
If you smoke pot, should you lose custody of your children? A Kansas woman is making national news after her 11-year-old son is taken into the care of Child Protective Services after he tells a class at his Garden City school how his mother's life had been saved by marijuana. School officials contacted police, who searched her house and found marijuana and cannabis oil. Today, her story has gone global. More than 110,000 people signing an online petition supporting her. A GoFundMe account raising more than $42,000 to help her with a legal fight. And conservative broadcaster Glenn Beck chiming in, criticizing the overreach of police. Meanwhile, in Missouri, pressure mounting on Governor Nixon to free Jeff Mizanskey. If you're not familiar with his name, he's the man serving a life sentence without parole for 3 separate incidents of buying, selling and possessing marijuana, all non-violent related offenses. In the 20 years he's already been behind bars, he has seen rapists and murderers come and go. A 390,000 signature petition, including the names of over 100 lawmakers, dropped off at the governor's office last week, asking the governor to grant clemency in the case. But do these 2 cases then make the news, do anything to shift attitudes among lawmakers in Kansas and Missouri on loosening marijuana laws, or are they viewed as isolated cases that don't tell the whole story? Scott?
I hope these stories do work in some way to change the minds. The one in Missouri is just an absolute travesty. Not to suggest that the one in western Kansas isn't, but I've said this before. I think we're living in an era where 2 things that we all grew up with and accepted as just the norm will be changing. Gay marriage will soon be legal in all 50 states, and I would bet within the next 10 years, marijuana will be legal in most, if not all, of the 50 states.
Steve?
Yeah, I think the attitudes about this are shifting really fast about marijuana. I was in Colorado a few weeks ago where in Denver...
Strictly for business.
Strictly for business. There are a lot of marijuana dispensaries in Denver, and I stood outside one and I watched, the people who were coming in and out. And in one 15-minute segment, I saw a couple of young people go in. I saw a guy in a clown suit go in. I saw a guy in a suit go in. There's a large cross-section of people who are starting to sort of shift their attitudes about this. And particularly for state legislators like legislatures like Missouri and Kansas, I think when they see the money involved in legalizing marijuana, I think that's going to really trip the switch.
Well, I think money is a key word here. Let's keep in mind exactly one other reason why Kansas is taking a look at this, Nick, and that's 2 words: prison overcrowding. Kansas has a problem there by removing prisoners who are ensconced because of marijuana violations. They can free up bed space and save a lot of money. I think that's what's driving a lot of the conversation in Topeka right now. This is keep in mind, as Dave just pointed out, a very conservative legislature. For this crowd to endorse legalization of marijuana, I think it's going to take a little while. But in the meantime,
even when you have people like Glenn Beck, a very conservative broadcaster, also expressing doubt about a lot of these cases.
Well, about this one case, I think. Yeah.
The other thing to keep in mind is voters who are increasingly endorsing the idea of legal marijuana. They did so in Wichita just a couple of weeks ago. They said, in essence, we want to decriminalize most possession of small amounts of marijuana. The state of Kansas, for reasons that are not clear to me, is suing to try and stop that ordinance from going into effect, in part because the state believes it always knows more than local governments. But the people are telling lawmakers, this is something we want, and don't fear. It may be cannabis oil, it may be medicinal marijuana, it may be marijuana for recreational uses. But I think Scott is right. 10 years from now, we'll look back on this era and laugh at how hard people tried to stop marijuana from becoming a reality.
A betrayal of public trust with huge ramifications, and the story gets even bigger this week. A state of Kansas employee accused of issuing dozens of fraudulent driver's licenses at the Mission DMV office on Johnson Drive admits she pocketed nearly $50,000 in bribes. 28-year-old Samantha Jo Moore is charged with 51 felony counts in issuing driver's licenses, many to people who entered the United States illegally. But what are the implications of this scandal on the rest of us, Scott?
First of all, you have to look into the simple fact that a lot of people make the argument, and I'm not necessarily endorsing it, but people like Chris Kobach who look at voter fraud and illegals voting in elections, certainly this would be a step in that direction. Keep in mind, some of the Social Security numbers that were used to get these fraudulent driver's licenses were real. God be with anybody who had one of those Social Security numbers taken from them that now somebody else also has. And I think that's a real concern.
So does this add weight to Chris Kobach's elbow when he talks about this issue of the potential of undocumented immigrants voting in elections?
Well, Not necessarily, in my view, because Chris Kobach's remedy is photo ID, and if you can fraudulently obtain driver's licenses with your picture on them and fraudulently obtain Social Security numbers, you can cast ballots, and the Kobach remedy wouldn't stop that. So, but I do think it sort of feeds into this idea of the potential illegality of some illegal immigrants into the United States, which increases the pressure to bring some order to this system, maybe on a national level.
But we do expect certain things to be an integrity of a system.
Yeah.
And almost all, many of us have gone to that office. And to think that it was so easy to have bribed somebody to get a driver's license without having any qualifications whatsoever, Steve.
But every system has its weaknesses. Every system can be exploited. That's what's happened here. I think some perspective is in order, Nick. 56 cases here. Yeah, it resulted in a lot of money for the woman who's now charged with a crime. But this is not a huge number of cases. It doesn't raise new questions about the integrity of our voting system or anything else, at least in my mind.
Steve.
Yeah, Steve, I agree with Steve. And, these vulnerabilities are particularly apparent when you have employees who are making very low wages. They're susceptible to being taking bribes and things of this nature.
We had a similar issue in St. Joseph here a couple of years ago when there was a rather systemic effort to try and extend IDs to illegal immigrants. I do think the federal government needs to take a look at this, but I agree with my colleagues that the number doesn't suggest some huge wave of problems.
Just as a group of Kansas City civil rights leaders filed the paperwork to place on the Kansas City ballot a hike in the city's minimum wage, state lawmakers were close to sending to the governor's desk a bill making it even clearer than the existing law that no city can enact wage ordinances that exceed the state's minimum wage. For good measure, the bill also puts a stop to plans by some cities to ban plastic grocery store bags. Even Prairie Village in Kansas has been considering doing that. Cities would not be able to tell customers they can't use plastic bags, according to this new bill that has cleared the House and Senate. Does this put an end to the minimum wage issue once and for all in Kansas City, in spite of the words of local civil rights leaders this week, Dave?
Well, I don't think it puts broadly an end to the idea of raising the minimum wage. There are federal efforts to do that. There may be a statewide effort in 2016. It does put a serious crimp or a bigger crimp in the idea that localities could raise the minimum wage or establish a living wage, as some have suggested they want to do. That's a very high hurdle. The legislature is clearly telling cities this is an area they don't want to
Why is that so important to state lawmakers to say, no, Kansas City can't do that, or Columbia, Missouri, you can't have a plastic bag ban?
Well, there's a belief that the legislature and lawmakers need to protect the grocery store business, which operates on very slim margins, Nick, that if you have different rules in different cities, that could put a hardship on the grocery store business chains, I guess. What really strikes me is something that Dave mentioned a little while ago. There is a certain hypocrisy going on here. Republicans who control the legislature champion local control at all levels of government, letting each branch decide for itself what the rules should be. And here's Jefferson City dictating to cities what they can do on plastic grocery store bags. And that's
but a lot of these rules, though, whether it be living wage or plastic grocery store bags, they're coming out of sort of St. Louis, Columbia, Kansas City. They're viewed as more leftist, progressive cities, Scott, and the legislature needs to put a check on that.
Well, but I just want to follow up on what Steve was just mentioning. I find hypocrisy and irony fascinating to watch in action. And I guarantee you that every one of the Republicans in Jefferson City who took part in this are every day complaining about the federal government's always in our business, and yet they decide to get into the city's business as well. And I find it so hypocritical but yet funny at the same time.
Well, one of the things they'll say is, well, we can't have a different minimum wage in every city. It has to be uniform in the state of Missouri or state of Kansas. But then if you suggest, hey, how about if we have uniform gun laws in the United States? Oh, that's usurping our authority as the state. It's so hypocritical that I think some lawmakers, frankly, Nick, don't care anymore. We can call them hypocrites, and they go, yeah, we're hypocrites. The hell with you. I mean, really, that happens. That's happening a lot.
Alrighty, and finally, ladies and gentlemen, the World Series is coming to Arrowhead Stadium. The World Series of barbecue, that is. Officials with the American Royal announcing they're taking their world-renowned barbecue contest from the Kemper Arena parking lot to Arrowhead Stadium, with concerns that the Royal may be looking at plans to move to Kansas. Is this a sigh of relief for Kansas City officials. What are you supposed to make of this announcement, Steve?
Well, I think the move of the barbecue contest really kind of de-emphasizes the need for Kemper Arena or for taking imminent action on Kemper Arena. Most people associate American Royal with the barbecue contest. Now that's in a much bigger parking lot over at the Truman Sports Complex. And I don't sense that there's still much interest from the American Royal to cooperate with the city on a new plan for what they want to do with their complex. They've made overtures to Kansas City, Kansas. Those are presumably ongoing.
Now, they could have decided to take this somewhere completely different, Scott. This is still in Kansas City, Missouri, and there's lots of parking over at Arrowhead Stadium. So is this a smart, pragmatic move?
Yeah, for them, I mean, they're already the biggest barbecue competition in the country. With that parking lot, they can only get bigger, I presume. But I don't know what they're going to do with the livestock competitions and stuff. And as Steve was mentioning, you know, Wyandotte County stands to potentially gain. Clay County could gain. But I've never understood, and I don't want to get in the crosshairs of the Kemper family. I have never understood some people in the city's fascination with that arena. It is a turd.
So to speak, ladies and gentlemen. Steve.
Well, this might free up some flexibility down in the West Bottoms here. The talk among the American Royal people was they want to build another building next to Kemper Arena to do what they want to do. That would take up space that the barbecue folks now occupy, but they're moving, so this does make things a little more flexible down there. I think for the barbecue crowd, this is going to be great. A lot more room, a lot more things to do down there.
One judge told us this week that, you know, it could have gone to Oklahoma City. They'd love to have something like this. You know, we shouldn't take this for granted.
Right, although there was a letter to the editor in the Star today from some barbecuer guy who said, hey, this isn't beer and brats in the parking lot. He's a little worried about going to Arrowhead, so there may be a bit of a pushback. But I think the broader thing, Nick, is let's keep our eye on the West Bottoms and the Kemper area. The American Royal is increasingly an anachronism, and it may be on its last legs if the people who support it can't figure out a way to bring more traffic, more interest, and more involvement to that area.
And that is our Week in Review. Our thanks to our news reviewers. Hear him weekday mornings at 11 as the host of Up to Date on KCUR-FM, Steve Kraske, and in print and online at The Pitch, Steve Vokrot. He is 50% of Dana and Parks, 2 to 6 weekdays on 98.1 FM, KMBZ Scott Parks, and every day on your driveway in the pages of the Star, Dave Helling. I'm Nick Haynes. From all of us here at KCPT, thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.